Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Baggett, founder of Car Dealer magazine, and today on the show I'm delighted to be chatting to three of the team from Haymarket Automotive. Now joining me are Rachael Prasher, Managing Director of Haymarket Automotive. Good afternoon, Rachael.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, thanks for joining us. Jim Holder, Editorial Director of Haymarket Automotive. Good afternoon, Jim.
Hello, good afternoon.
And Mark Tisshaw, who is the editor of Autocar. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hello, James.
Hello, thank you very much for joining us. Now, a quick introduction to your business and yourselves. For those that don't know, Haymarket Automotive publishes Autocar, What Car, Classic and Sports Car and Cat magazines. Combined, that equates to 10 million users online and 240,000 magazines a month, making them, they believe, the largest automotive publisher in the UK. What Car famously has around a Wembley Stadium-sized number of visitors researching cars on its website every day, while Autocar has been breaking news for 120 years this year. Mark's been editing Autocar since 2018, and he's led the mag to 2 successive ABC sales rises, no mean feat. Jim has edited Autocar and What Car, and is now the editorial director for Haymarket Automotive, while Rachael has been MD of Haymarket Automotive since it was formed in 2017, and she's charged with transforming things into a digitally led business. Right, let's get started. I want to start, Jim, with you. Let's chat about manufacturers and how they've been affected by this crisis. How desperate a picture is it for manufacturers at the moment?
Yeah, I think if we consider we've been talking about a perfect storm for manufacturers probably for 2 or 3 years now, starting perhaps with the emissions issues, but then the need to invest in low emission technology, autonomy, mobility projects, all these problems coming their way, and we kept talking about it as a perfect storm and suggesting things couldn't get any worse. Well, here we are. Things have got worse, and they've got significantly worse. I think probably the best snapshot we've had this week has come from the earnings calls from Ford, a 2 billion loss, which is a 3 billion swing from where they were a year ago, with a 5 billion loss predicted for the second quarter. Mercedes proving slightly more robust, but still very, very bad news and big losses. And then Volkswagen again, perhaps remarkably, both Volkswagen and Mercedes still predicting that they will operate in profit this year and recording decent profits for the quarter, but they are significantly down on where they were. And of course, I think what we have to consider is however robust these car companies are, and it does appear the majority will be robust enough to see this through, what will the impact be long term and what will it push back? We've talked about that perfect storm and all the investments required. Will those investments have to be pushed back, and can they meet the regulatory requirements around emissions whilst pushing back some of those projects that are less profitable?
You've certainly mentioned some very strong manufacturers there who are suffering incredibly seriously at this time. If those that are strong manufacturers and were in a good position before that, just how bad is it for those that weren't in that sort of position?
Yeah, I think definitely at the bottom end, the ones we were worrying about before, you have to worry about even more now. We knew Fiat was looking at going into merger with PSA. You would imagine that becomes ever more critical for Fiat, but ever more problematic for PSA. You would imagine, Jaguar and Land Rover, they were in a perilous position. They had done a huge amount of very positive work to dig themselves out of that. But of course, some of the problems they were trying to solve were things like a slump in the Chinese market. They've had to endure a deeper slump. They're now coming out of it very quickly, but that can't help but to have impacted them. You look at the SMMT figures from this week that in the UK alone, the shutdowns in manufacturing will cost around 8.2 billion over the coming months. Which manufacturers is that impacting? Of course, Jaguar Land Rover is going to be at the forefront of that as the biggest manufacturer in the UK. And then you look at some of the startups, even Tesla, that's done so well and is so impressive. And I suspect this Tuesday, when we get what will be certainly dreadful registration figures for the UK car industry, but we may well see Tesla, taking 3 slots with the 3 cars it makes in the top 10. We may even see it in the top 3 or even up the top of manufacturers making registrations, but that is not a company that wants to be burning through cash at the moment. So anyone we were worried about before, this is only going to have made things worse.
I remember reading in the press about JLR burning $1 billion a month during this crisis. I mean, that cannot be sustained, can it?
Absolutely not. There was a very good piece in The Economist recently looking at how quickly car manufacturers would burn through the cash reserves they have. I think we can see them burning through the cash now, and we can see them all doing that. I think perhaps even more worryingly, we can see some of them taking on debt and loans at borderline toxic rates, 10% plus, in order to see themselves through. So I think even if we're confident about the future of some of them, and they are viable businesses still going forwards, it's the burden they are taking on that is as much as a worry as the immediate threat of burning through that cash. And absolutely, you mentioned $1 billion a month for JLR. I've read figures of that much a week for some of the big Volkswagen groups and other groups. Absolutely, that is unsustainable.
You make a very interesting point about Tesla there in those sales figures for April. They've clearly been enjoying demand that is finally been able to be supplied in the last few months. Are they still managing to deliver cars at the moment in Tesla?
I'm not actually sure if they're carrying on or whether they've suspended like everyone else, but my understanding is because of the way they've operated in the past, they probably have a bit more freedom to keep moving. The indications are they have delivered cars. They've certainly registered them throughout last month. Obviously, we don't get the figures till next week, but the stories I'm hearing are that they have managed to register a relatively large number of cars. I don't think anyone can call it a real term large number of cars, and that they could prove to have some very positive figures relative to the rest of the market when the figures are announced.
That'll certainly be interesting, and I'm sure if anybody's going to make the most of some good news like that, it's Elon Musk. But on those sales figures front, we're expecting the market to be down in the very high 90s, minus 90%. There were some manufacturers who were already struggling in the UK up until this point. I mean, some that are selling a handful of cars before this crisis. Do you think we're going to lose any manufacturers from the UK?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and I think you'd be foolish to rule it out. All I'd say is that the majority of them have always appeared to be able to exist at the level they were at. There were a few that you were worried about and felt should be doing better, and there are many with ambitions to do better, but mostly they appeared to be right-sized, and that should help them see this through. But, as you say, they are all burning cash. They all have staff and overheads to meet. And you can easily see how that equation, always so precarious in the car industry, even for the successful car makers, how it can swing the wrong way. My money would be on most of them, all of them, I think, seeing it through. But I have no doubt there will be some wobbles in there.
It will certainly be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks and months. I'm going to come on to Mark in a moment to discuss how it's going to affect the model plans. But just before we do that, Jim, do you think we're going to see any more consolidation of brands like the PSA, FCA merger off the back of this? I mean, JLR are in a difficult situation, are they not? And could they not be snapped up by one of the bigger manufacturers out there?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. I think there were plenty of rumours before this crisis. I think when Europe started plunging into this crisis, a lot of our contacts in China were already telling us that the government was putting what were then emerging domestic car companies onto a war footing, telling them to get back on their feet and get ready with their cash reserves because there was going to be opportunity for acquisition. And that would be major news. And all the usual suspects in China who have already been acquiring must be sensing that there are some bargains to be had. JLR, absolutely, we had talked about them and potential mergers, and I would think there will be people hovering, looking for opportunities with them, but also with other car makers as well.
Be interesting to see what happens there. Mark, I'm going to turn to you now. On the actual model side of things, have you seen any information off the back of this that is going to delay new model launches? Have you heard that in any of your in any of your stories?
Nothing concrete as such, but I think everything is going to get delayed a bit. There was a lot of very big selling volume cars that were imminent in dealers. Cars like the Seat Leon, Skoda Octavia, Volkswagen Golf, Audi A3, and. There was so many coming. Inevitably, they couldn't make it into the showrooms in the March, April when they were due. So it's going to be more like April, May June time, that will then have a knock-on effect down the line for the models that follow. Ford's the one who's, again, probably been the most open, but maybe it just tied in with their results in the Mach-E. Maserati was due to relaunch as a brand in May. That's been pushed back to the autumn. Various other sort of smaller launches from Volkswagen, Mercedes, Citroën, and so on. Even cars that were due to be revealed at the Geneva Motor Show. The Toyota Yaris Cross was one that got cancelled. So Toyota revealed it 6 weeks later online last week. So I'd say cancellations, no, but postponements and delays, yes, everything. Effectively, life is on hold, and that's no different for the car manufacturers too.
Do you think manufacturers are going to end up cutting existing models from their range off the back of this?
I think if that's going to happen, and it probably will, it's more to do with electrification, and the investments are just massive for that. Effectively, you're having to invest in cars for the future, sort of 5-10 years down the line, while also investing in all the cars you need to sell today. Volkswagen's had to invest in a new Golf 8, which will run into the billions, at the same time as an even bigger investment in electrification in the ID family. Something has to give, and that's niche models. We don't really see that many coupes, that many cabriolets, the kind of luxury niche cars. They weren't really existing anyway, and this merely just kind of is the final nail in the coffin for them, I'd say.
You've seen some incredible growth in Autocar over the last couple of years. Congratulations on that achievement, because I know how difficult it is when you're pushing out magazines to get a sales rise. How difficult is it at the moment to do your job, Mark?
It's, I wouldn't say difficult, it's just different. Clearly, we're not out testing cars, we're not going on news events, and let's say Geneva, it's not just Geneva. We get kind of scoops and speak to sources, and that feeds the news pages for weeks, if not months, to follow. The same with drives. But I think the beauty of Autocar, we are our breadth of coverage is so vast. We can cover 50, £100 bangers with the same authority that we can cover £2 million hypercars. And new cars, used cars, we just cover anything in the car world. So while you're not out testing cars, you can just be out even remotely picking up a feature from home. And, I would say this, but I genuinely believe it. We've got the best team, the best writers in the business, and we're adaptable. Everyone is a really strong, top all-round journalist. And just because we're not out testing cars and going on news events doesn't mean we're not still setting a news agenda. When you control the agenda, you control it. You're not a slave to the diary at all. And I think that's what we've done. I'm very proud of the magazines and the website, even more so in the last few weeks. And I think you generally would not be able to tell what's going on in the content we've produced.
So on that subject, what are the big talking points that you're covering at the moment? What is on the agenda?
Well, we've kept going with our scoops because cars are still going to be coming out. We've had, we'd like to think we're very well connected within Jaguar Land Rover and what's coming up there. We've had some really strong stories there. We've been lucky in we've got a very good experienced correspondent in Germany, and car testing is allowed to continue there, and he's really helped fuel it. But interestingly, as I just pull up the data, it's a real mix as well. So the top stories have been around the COVID-19 crisis, around car dealers. Actually, I think that was our most popular story over the last couple of months. Was a link back to your story, James, around car dealers being able to sell cars again. That just, I think, is a great example of the breadth of coverage. In 1 week or month, it might be the Land Rover Defender review. In another week, and in this crisis, it's around car dealers and what they're doing, which kind of shows, how broad again our audience is, how great their thirst for knowledge is, and that they look to us to kind of, lead that agenda.
I've long thought that Autocar had a seat on the board at JLR, and that's how you got hold of all of these good stories. But I won't press you on that. I'm going to move to Rachael and ask about the data that you've been pushing out, Rachael, over the last few weeks has been really positive for the industry. Was that a marked decision on your side to help G the market up in some way?
Well, I am a known optimist by my own admission. I think, you know, we took the view very early on that we would do everything that we could to support our industry, our clients, and also to provide our audience with meaningful content and information as well. And one of the first decisions we took was to openly share our data in a way that we perhaps haven't in the past for, you know, obvious reasons. So we put a survey onto the site, which we've been running, as you know, on an ongoing basis, and we capture that. We have a stop point each week where we capture that in its entirety, and we have anything from 3,000 to 9,000 people responding to that. So it's a brilliantly robust piece of data, and obviously we're measuring how it changes over the week. So have we deliberately gone out with the strategy of being positive? I think it's fair to say we are looking for positives. I think it's important for the industry that we are able to identify without misleading where those kind of green shoots of recovery are. But I also think from an audience perspective, you know, particularly in Autocar, but in What Car as well, we have an audience who are celebrating and loving cars. So what they probably don't want to read is a load of doom mongering on an ongoing basis. So it hasn't been entirely deliberate, and actually we have been able to find those good news stories in there. Nonetheless, I think in the Insight this week we did lead with a story around the medium-term risks that we're starting to see in some of that data as well. So we haven't shied away from the tougher messages, I would hope.
There was some positive story that we covered on the site yesterday from your data that new car buyers need to be quick because of a potential shortage of cars. Can we just touch on that a little bit? I mean, how did you get to that assumption?
It's something that Jim and I had spoken about, that actually there's sort of growing concern that if people were pausing, and we could see in the data there's this sort of pent up demand, but ultimately are pausing to buy, as you would expect, not least because in the majority of cases they can't buy in the truest sense. And so we started running some background work around actually what was that going to mean if you suddenly, you know, the doors open, let's hope at some point in the not too distant future, and consumers are able to fully transact again. What does that mean to the market buy? You know, they're in a very popular segment like electric cars, or buying into some of those tougher to get hold of SUV segments. What's that actually going to mean? And Jim was of the very clear view that you know, there is risk in there if you are not signalling intent in whatever form, ideally some sort of deposit, I think, for the car industry at the moment, then you might find yourself at the back of a pretty long queue.
Jim, on that point, what are your thoughts around that? Do you think we are going to run out of cars in the short term?
I think there's a very real risk. I really do. I think from our What Car data, we're looking at 1 in 5 respondents to this very robust survey saying they're going to buy either as soon as coronavirus crisis ends, whatever that means, or within 4 weeks of now. So there is this pent up demand that we're seeing. I think we're also seeing the factories are closed and going to be reopening at lower speeds than perhaps they were once. And we're going to see manufacturers who want to shift stock, and actually in some cases manufacturers who have to ship stock into the UK, and a lot will depend on when that boat has landed and whether they have the stock waiting or whether they don't. And I think those things combined are already looking at waiting lists. You know, we've heard from car buyers who've been contacted by dealers and they've been told, you know, you can have the car that you've ordered, but it's now got to be blue, it's got to be in this spec. You know, car manufacturers, clearly they want to manage their costs, they want to clear the stock that they have and turn it into cash where they can, and they don't want to turn those factories on too early or too fast, and managing that is going to be hard, and I think that is going to push waiting lists for factory order cars upwards, and I think of course within that there will be opportunity for nearly new pre-registered or used cars.
We're going to touch on the new car buying solution in a moment, Jim. But I'd just like to get some understanding of, you're clearly pushing consumers through to dealers at the moment and manufacturers in terms of leads. How are they dealing with that at the moment? Because a lot of these dealers have got staff furloughed. A lot of them are closed. Some aren't even doing any business at all. Are you seeing that? Are the dealers coping with what you're sending them?
I think it's a very mixed story. We actually have a What Car helpline which goes straight through to my mobile. So, I'm talking to genuine car buyers every single day. And at times it's inspiring. There are car dealer groups who have been on the front foot throughout and who have been able to largely manage and help customers. But there are a lot of manufacturers and retailers who have just shut shop, and that's understandable. But I think they have to get their strategies into a new place. I think just looking at our data, it's clear as anything, and they must have their own data to look at too. It's clear as anything that in the last 10 days, there has been a mindset shift. And I think that's only going to accelerate. When I talk to car buyers who are told, that tell me they've been on hold for 30 minutes to a manufacturer hotline, that's not good enough. That's a customer who was wanting to buy a car that day on hold. When they tell me that they've rung around dealers and they can't get hold of anyone, really, this is an industry that is going to feel pain, and it's going to complain loudly about feeling that pain. It has to help itself now. And there are practical challenges and financial challenges to that, but anyone who isn't putting procedures in place to try and deal with it, I think, they're at risk now of missing the moment.
I mean, I know it's tough for these dealers at the moment when they haven't got the staff in place. But I mean, even you go back to December when we were doing our judging for our used car awards, even when we're ringing up dealers who are putting themselves forward as the best of the best, 30% of them didn't return our calls. And that is going to be something that just will be inexcusable in the future when it comes to an industry that is looking to recover, surely. Yeah,
it's crazy. It pains me even to hear you say it. It's so, it's not hard to do. Why does the What Car helpline come straight through to my mobile? Because I want to be on the pulse of what's happening. I'm not suggesting every dealer group MD starts answering the phone or anything like that. But, you might have 1,000 staff furloughed, but it's quite easy to channel all your inquiries through to one place and support it from there. And of course, there are plenty of opportunities out there. There are plenty of leads coming through from various sources that can be dealt with, and you can build that pipeline. And I think that is going to become so important. This big early rush we've talked about is great. The worrying news, as Rachel mentioned, is medium term. If you're not building that now, you're going to feel some pain, I think.
Absolutely. Mark, can I just turn to you on this point? What are your readers searching for at the moment? Are they looking for new cars, do you think?
Yes, very much so. Clearly traffic's down on the website, but it's very much bottomed out and is on the rise again, to the point where it's kind of only single digit drops now. And the kind of gap in the traffic is purely the gap that's been left by new car reviews and kind of latest news. Everything else, people are still looking for it and are still finding it. The kind of, I'm just looking at our data again, it's Golfs do well, Golf Rs, that kind of stuff. That people are still searching for cars. People are still finding the reviews they want. And I think the beauty of Autocar is, particularly online, is we really do serve car buyers. It's Autocar traditionally, and has always been and still is, an enthusiast magazine, but increasingly all the web growth has come through reviews traffic, online reviews. So we launched some kind of top 10 lists for our recommendations. One that's been flying throughout all this is our top 10 family SUVs. It is every single month one of our most popular stories. So, all the signs are there that people are still looking for cars and are ready to go. And the only real vacuum is the fact the new car reviews can't happen at the moment.
When it comes to dealers, Mark, what do you think really annoys your readers the most about them?
There's no hiding place on our letters page in the magazine. Our readers are incredibly well-informed buyers. They know what they want before they've set foot in the dealer. And the biggest thing we see is dealers not wanting to sell them cars. We get that. It quite frequently comes in that, they'll walk in a brand, invariably premium manufacturers. I think the letters come from, it's JLR cars, Mercedes, BMW, and they'll go in and they'll stand next to the car. I want to buy this car, but no one will seem interested in their service, and they'll go off and buy something else. So I think it's kind of, and that Autocar is maybe just the tip of the iceberg, but I think generally buyers now are incredibly well informed. You know, they know what they want. They want to buy what they want to buy, not what the dealer wants to sell them. And I think that's going to be more important than ever. You know, I'd imagine the buyers coming out of this will be the best informed they'll ever be. They'll have done even more research than normal. They know what they want, and they want to be sold what they want, not what the dealer wants to sell them.
They've certainly had a lot of time on their hands to do some research, that's for sure. What about your thoughts on motor shows? Clearly, Geneva was cancelled, Paris has been cancelled, I think New York was cancelled, and I'm sure I'll probably mix them more in between. Are they ever going to come back, Mark?
Probably not, to be honest, in the form we know. They were on the decline anyway. I think from the manufacturer side, it's a huge undertaking from the marketing budget, and it's very difficult to kind of attribute a kind of return on that investment. The North American motor shows, you know, the fees are outrageous, as they are, you know, in Europe as well. And it's no coincidence that manufacturers were pulling out. And a motor show, we love them. They're fantastic. They're brilliant for access as much as anything, as well as seeing the cars. And it's more what we can get beyond that. But if you're a manufacturer, let's say Geneva, there's all bar 5 brands there. So you've got 25 major car manufacturers, each revealing 1 or 2 things on the same day, plus another announcement. That's kind of 75, 80 news stories without even trying that we've got to cover, and they've got to fight for that share of voice. If Toyota's, you know, they were going to reveal the Yaris Cross at Geneva, revealed it last week. When they revealed it last week, there was nothing else going on in the car world. They got full, way more coverage than they would have done. And I think we were seeing that more anyway. And I think manufacturers will realise that, hang on, we can just get a much bigger share of voice when we're not just fighting amongst ourselves.
And I suppose that also spreads the news out during the year. I mean, you've pointed to the fact that Geneva gives you all of that content. If they pick and choose when they launch these cars and reveal them to the press, it means that, well, it's probably going to make our jobs a little bit easier, isn't it? Yeah,
no, that's fantastic. Yeah, I agree. You know, we get asked sometimes, you know, when's a good day, and we would generally say put it away from a motor show. You know, even in the run up to Geneva this year, I know the show was ultimately cancelled, but no one was revealing anything in advance. You know, there was kind of, we were really surprised when you look at our covers from February. And historically, we'd have had a Geneva show star every week for about 6 weeks. This year, there was none. They were just holding on, and I do find it a bit strange, to be honest, because every car manufacturer, you know, rightly thinks they're the biggest game in town, but the reality is a bit different. You know, there is a natural hierarchy. So some manufacturers revealing stuff, it just would not get the coverage if they're launching at Geneva than they would on July the 14th. You know, that for example.
I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you what car you're looking forward to most that's coming out in the next few months.
I've said Volkswagen a lot. I'm Golf GTI is I think the best all-round car in the world, and we've got a good story coming up very, very soon on that car. And from the early version I've seen, I really can't wait for that one. I had one as a long-termer a couple of years ago, and I do quite a few long-termers. I then try and do the man maths to work out and buy them, and I've done it before, but I still to this day think, that was the sweetest spec of a long-term everywhere. So for me, it's Golf GTI, but inevitably there's some fascinating electric cars coming up as well. And I think at Autocar, we've always given every new technology, every manufacturer, every car a really fair hearing and a good grounding to kind of get their story across. We're not sniffy, we're not dismissive. You know, we kind of treat everyone with an openness and a warmth, as do our readers. And you can see it in the search traffic. Our readers want to know about electrification and electric cars. You mentioned the Mach-E, the Mustang. There's a lot of interest in that car, and it's those volume players and what they're going to do with electric cars. That's, I think, going to be a real story over the coming months and years.
Thank you for that. I'm going to turn to Rachel and just ask a little bit about the new car buying platform in a moment. But firstly, Rachel, can you just tell me, are manufacturers actually spending any money on marketing at the moment? I mean, it's the lifeblood of magazines like yours and websites like yours.
Yeah, I mean, we've been very lucky because we have a very diversified revenue mix, so we're not dependent on a single stream, which massively helps us. It insulates us in situations like this. Having said that, in situations like this, almost every revenue stream is obviously affected. So April's been really tough, as you would expect. The majority, I think there is one premium manufacturer exception, everybody paused, as you would expect. You know, the truth is, as Mark and Jim have already said, you know, traffic took a battering as lockdown was announced. And so even I think if they'd carried on, we would have struggled to serve out those campaigns. I mean, What Car in particular is always sold out. I think April is the first time any of us can remember when it hasn't been. So managing those campaigns is always a bit of a juggle for us, making sure they go against the right audiences. But what we have seen in the last 2 weeks is very, very clear signals of intent to spend again, if not actual campaign laydown from everybody, which is brilliant. And, you know, it won't be at the levels that we might have enjoyed pre-lockdown. And I think even when we get back to what we would regard as business as usual, which is looking like June at the moment in terms of marketing, it's not going to be at the same levels, which is inevitable. We've worked quite hard with Campaign. Campaign's our sister publication. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but it's the industry bible for the advertising and media industry. And they've done some great work with us, sharing research data around why it is really important to keep spending during a crisis, and it will enable your recovery to be much steeper on the other side. But we've just, the role that we've taken with manufacturers with advertising is the same as we've done with dealers. Look, we will cut you an enormous amount of slack. We'll be bringing value in addition to your regular spend in a way that we've never ever done before, because clearly the survival of everybody in this is critical to recovery on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't be here and able to have this conversation if it wasn't for the suppliers who've supported Car Dealer magazine over the last few weeks, and I'd publicly like to thank them very much for that. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the new car buying platform. You came out very early on with the decision to offer that free of charge. That's probably quite a clever thing to do for you guys, because you're going to hook in a lot of people into the product. Has it worked?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I mean, that was a tough call. I was on my once a day permitted walk in Bushy Park, which fortunately is around the corner from me, on the phone to the team. I think the day of lockdown, and I said, look, we've got to be decisive in this now, and we have got to support our dealers on the way through. And I was really, really clear, as with the team, that we couldn't just put a disingenuous offer out to market that said, trial the platform for a couple of months and then you'll be held to an ongoing paid commitment. We said, look, people have got to be able to come in with no strings attached and use it on the way through, and if they choose not to on the other side, so be it. And equally, for those dealers, and we've been fortunate to have many who have given us paid support since we launched 18 months ago, it has to be free for them as well. You know, it's crazy. You can't do it. You know, everyone hates those new customer offers, and the existing customers feel disgruntled. So in the metrics we use to measure that is obviously the number of dealers on the platform. We're up about 30%. We've had no cancellations. So on that front, fantastic. We have intent from a huge volume more, and obviously that's dependent on them being able to answer those leads and work out what operational means for them. You know, I guess the ultimate acid test is whether or not they stay at the end of that trial, and we will see. I'll let you know. I hope so. You know, the risk you take is, of course, you're getting people to trial at a point in time where clearly there are far fewer consumers than you'd ordinarily expect to see. But I think people are very understanding that that's going to be the case. And actually over the last week, and Jim's kind of referenced it already, we've seen a really significant increase in the number of inquiries on the platform. In fact, we're trading well ahead of last year. And I don't read too much into that because we're a platform in rapid growth, so you would expect to see us growing. But nonetheless, to see that over the last week has been incredibly encouraging.
Jim, perhaps you could summarise the new car buying offer for dealers who might not have heard of it.
Yeah, so the platform basically connects our readership to franchise dealers who are online, so our readers can talk to those dealers and their offers. And at the moment, that platform is available for free to use till the end of June. And is there, you just literally need to get in touch with the team. They will set you up. And if the readers are looking at your vehicle, they can put in the form, what they want to, how they want the car, and the conversation begins. And from there, the lead is the dealers to nurture.
Jim, do you think demand is going to be hit following this bounce that we've discussed about with a deep recession, with many people out of work, BA saying that they're going to lose 12,000 jobs, Ryanair this morning saying they're going to cut 3,000 jobs, hospitality and pubs are going to be severely hit? How is that going to affect new cars and used cars and the market in general, in your opinion?
I think not even the greatest optimist could paint a positive picture of that. I think it will hit the market very significantly. And I think we can already see some sort of worrying underlying trends around long-term intent to purchase cars. People are worried, probably with good reason. And particularly for the new car market, I think that's extremely worrying. I think the used car market, traditionally is more robust at these times, and you can imagine very easily why people might look to move away from more expensive tied-in monthly deals to something much more manageable. But I think the new car market is heavily affected. I think when we look to parallels that we all like trumpeting around the world of car markets emerging quickly, China being the most likely one, but also Korea doing extremely well. But even when you look to China, there are stimulus packages in place there. And while I think it's a tightrope for the industry to walk, I would fully expect it to be looking for some support down the line.
I think you're right. I mean, we wrote a piece this week about the German car market. They've been back to work 9 days at the point that I'd written that piece. And they were seeing 50% of the customers that they thought they were going to see. They simply opened the doors and the customers weren't there. So you've got to hope that there is some form of stimulus package introduced. I was chatting to a dealer on Monday, Sean Kelly from Vines BMW, who said you need to make a decision of when you switch that on, though. If we all go back to work on June the 1st properly and turn on a scrappage scheme on June the 2nd, we might be triggering things a little bit too soon. What are your thoughts on a stimulus measures for the industry? Do you think it should be a scrappage scheme, or do you think it should be a cut in VAT? I mean, what would you like to see the government do to help support this industry?
Is that Jim?
Sorry, Jim, have you lost us there? Oh, we might have lost Jim.
Yes, can you hear me? Or
yeah, we can hear you now. I don't know how much you got of that question, but
I heard the question. You broke up, but I didn't. So hopefully you can hear me now. Okay. I think for the stimulus package, it almost doesn't matter what form it takes in terms of reducing the cost of cars and trying to stimulate people to buy them. But I think what's crucial is the message it sends. Scrappage was all very well, but I think people were pretty pained then at cars that were perfectly drivable being crushed. I think in this modern world, and one that has had a glimpse of what it's like with pollution levels dipping so hard, to then go and crush perfectly serviceable vehicles may not ring true with the wider public. My own view is that whatever they do will have to be very heavily focused on getting older cars off the road in some form, and pushing people into lower emission vehicles. Now, of course, that doesn't come without problems. These are expensive vehicles, inherently more expensive, and those kinds of schemes, it's no good taking a car owner who's on a low income and trying to encourage them into a more expensive vehicle. So it obviously needs a very delicate handling. But I think the central message I would give is that all modern cars are exponentially cleaner than older cars, and anything that they can do to try and encourage that without literally killing the older cars would be a good thing.
Mark, I'm just going to turn to you quickly. We've been covering over the last few weeks how different car retailing is going to be. There's a lot of dealers setting themselves up for PPE changes, perspex screens, social distancing. Do you think those sorts of changes are going to be enough to convince buyers to go back to showrooms?
That's a tricky one. I think it will feel quite normal though, because it won't just be car dealers. Even going to Sainsbury's or Tesco or anywhere, it feels different right now, and I think that's going to be no different for car manufacturers. I don't think having a screen or not will make a difference to someone deciding to buy a car. I think as ever, it'll be a simple mathematical equation. Not certainly a long way from all car purchases being frivolous. People need to buy cars, and you mentioned Germany there, 50% down. Maybe it's 50% that are left are the ones who need to buy cars, and they'll buy a car whatever. Everyone's circumstances are different right now. We're seeing furlough schemes, people's incomes are being hit, but within that, people will need cars. And if anything, maybe medium to long term, bit of speculation, but you can well imagine more people wanting cars and being subjected to public transport, for example. The London Underground is talking that for social distancing to work, you need 15%. It can only run at 15% capacity, and it could just force, or not necessarily force, but make more people want to return to cars. Dealers, as Jim has said and Rachel has said, they've got to be ready for that. And I think it'd be maybe not easy, but fairly straightforward to implement social distancing in dealerships. There's a lot you can do that goes over and above to be seen to be doing it. I think, where cars can win is in the perfect self-isolation vehicle in a way that you can't get on any other form of transport.
I think we'll probably leave it there on that positive note, Mark. Thank you very much for your time today. Jim and Rachel, thank you also for giving up your time to chat to us today. That's hugely appreciated. Next week, I've got some great guests lined up, including on Monday, Nathan Tomlinson from Devonshire Motors, who's going to be doing a double act with Tony Denton from Bachelors. On Tuesday, I'm chatting to Tom Giaconelli. He's from supercar dealer Romans International. On Wednesday, I'm talking to TV's Mr. Wheeler dealer himself and dealership owner Mike Brewer. And on Thursday, which is the day before next week's Friday bank holiday, of course, it's Simon Webb from independent Langley Prestige. Now, if you want to get involved in car dealer lives like this one, you can email me, james@blackbullmedia.co.uk. You can find me on Twitter @CarDealerEd, or send me a message on LinkedIn. If you want breaking news sent direct to your phone, I've set up a Car Dealer Magazine WhatsApp group. To be added, just send me an email or via one of those methods I've already mentioned, and I'll get you included. There's a full schedule for Car Dealer Lives on our website. We'll check back every weekday for the next live broadcast. I hope you all have a very enjoyable weekend. I'm going to be spending it attempting to cut my hair. So if you come back on Monday, you'll see just how bad that is. So if there's an incentive to come back, that is it. Right. Thanks very much to the team from Haymarket Automotive. It's been fascinating chatting to you today. And I'll see the rest of you on Monday. Goodbye.